I mean, probably still it's a big ask.
And we are recording.
Good evening and welcome to the Eugene Police Commission. Today is Thursday, April 10th. I am Chair Jensina Hawkins and we will call the meeting to order. To review and approve the agenda, if there are any strenuous objections to the agenda as presented to you in the packet, please let me know. Otherwise, we will assume that that's been approved by the body. For the previous meeting recap, we had a rather robust public comment from folks representing Black Thistles aid from the street. And I understand there may have been some follow-up from some of the other commissioners regarding that. We had some review of the policies as well as a presentation from Officer Bo Rankin as far as the mutual, I already forgot the name of the term. What's the term, DC?
Are we talking mutual aid?
Mental health
Co-responder.
crisis.
Okay.
Okay, and
Yeah.
co-responder.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
This evening, we have with us acting in capacity Lieutenant Owen Griffith, who is our professional standards representative this evening. We have Deputy Chief Sean Adams, who is AIC for Chief Skinner tonight. We have a couple of student reporters and folks for public comment. Our minutes recorder is online this evening. With that, we can move into reviewing the February and March 2025 minutes. Thank you, Commissioner Lady, for pointing out that we did not go through that approval process. Last month, we were able to review the recording and determine what happened. I actually, I'll entertain a motion to approve February minutes, although I do have discussion.
That we approve the February minutes.
Thank you, Councilor
right.
Groves. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Ye. Thank you. So we'll open the floor for discussion, and I'm actually going to exercise my prerogative by beginning. For the February minutes, I had just a couple of notes, one of them being that the staff present included the independent police auditor. It's my understanding that the police auditor, even though as much as we enjoyed his presence, is not considered a member of EPD's staff. In the previous meeting recap, there was just a slight typo. Policy 370, not policy 379, was the one regarding communication with persons with disabilities. And in that particular section of the conversation, there was no mention of the burglary ring targeting the Asian community. Before reviewing the drone team policy on page 7 in paragraph 2, after watching the recording, I verified that I had asked if the drone video is subject to FOIA, like the Guardian trailers downtown. Other discussion for the February minutes. Commissioner Rady.
On page 6 of our packet, where I am quoted about 2/3 of the way down, Commissioner Rady commented he had been involved in and knew of others who were not comfortable, had been involved in organizing demonstrations. That's what I actually said. On page 8, again, my remarks, speaking about the welfare check conducted by officers, wants to spend time walking around the house and interviewing neighbors. On page 11, after deranged individuals with firearms, it should say when taken into were taken into custody, and in neither case was anyone shot, and that instead of honoring the individuals, honoring the officers who did that. Couple more. Where are you? On page 9, and that may be the next month's minute, so I will pick up there.
Other discussion regarding the minutes from February. Seeing none, Vice Chair Shivers, do we make a friendly amendment to that motion to approve the minutes with the edits as presented by Chair Hawkins and Commissioner Rady?
Yes.
Yes, but since Randy's the one who made the motion, he has to approve that it's friendly.
Yes, I said yes quietly.
You did.
that.
Sure. I'm in your seat.
Thank you, Councilor Groves. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes with the edits presented by Chair Hawkins, Commissioner Rady, please say aye. Present, not in favor, please say nay. And if there's any abstentions, please announce. Holly, I see a hand from you.
Yeah, it would be helpful if you could email me your edits so that I can make sure that I capture those correctly in the minutes corrections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. For the minutes from the March 13th meeting, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from March 13th.
Move to approve minutes from March 13th.
Thank you,
Second.
Councilor Ye, seconded by Commissioner Rady. Open the floor for discussion. Commissioner Rady, do you have comments?
I do.
Right.
Page 8 of these minutes, under the mutual aid overview, for the third from the bottom, I note that President Hawkins is described as Chief Hawkins, which no doubt would come as a shock to
I'll take it.
uh,
No, I
Chief
can't.
Skinner. On page 9, again, I'm quoted as saying, he said he had a problem about violations public record, but the discipline was not transparent. I'm more coherent than that usually, and I think I was then. With a lack of transparency, he had a problem with a lack of transparency in the discipline process. Period. And I will submit that as appropriate.
Thank you, Commissioner Rady. Any further discussion of the minutes from March? Councilor Ye, you accept the friendly amendment
Oh, yes.
to do what we
What
did.
he said, yeah.
Yes, thank you. All right, all in favor of approving the March minutes with the edits as suggested by Commissioner Rady, please say aye.
I,
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, that one also passes. We'll go to liaison reports. Dr. Silky Booker has stepped down as the liaison to Police Commission, and Human Rights Commission is waiting for City Council to appoint the new liaison to Police Commission. So we will take a liaison report from Civilian Review Board. Commissioner Neal.
Sure. We met on Tuesday and we reviewed a case in which an officer had deployed pepper spray. Sorry, an officer had deployed a taser. I'm reading the minutes from last month when we were talking about pepper spray. This incident was investigated because there was a broad discussion about use of force generally, and when a use of force is appropriate for the incident that the officer encounters. So the auditor's office initiated the investigation. And through that investigation, it was found to be a use of force that was within policy by both the chain of command, the chief of police, and the auditor. So everybody agreed at the end of that that it was, a within policy type of use of force. There was a good discussion, I think, on the board about when community members like CRB members or police commission members view uses of force, it's hard to watch and hard to observe for people who aren't familiar with it, or people who are not professionals like our police officers are. And so we had a lot of discussion about how we react to uses of force and whether that has an impact on policy down the line. But the lieutenant was there and gave some really helpful perspectives on the investigation and also the uses of force that were being reviewed. And so we really appreciate the engagement of the police department on all of those. And the other things we chatted about were we had a training from the K-9 officers, and sorry if that's not exactly how they're referred to, K-9 sergeants, I think they were. And that we learned a lot about how the dogs are trained, where they come from, how they are a part of the families of those police department employees, and that they are used in very specific cases. But right now, though, that part of that canine officers are a part of patrol, and so it's sort of deployed in a different way than maybe the specialized nature of their skills could be applied. And I think that's changing. Maybe the assistant chief can describe that more if people have questions about how that might be changing in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Hale. We'll go to City Council liaison reports. Councilor Groves.
We are still trying to work through our budget shortfall of $11.5 million. The fire services fee that was passed by a majority of council last month was successfully, or there was a successful referendum petition process filed, and that as of now will be scheduled to go to a public vote. Council had a meeting about this at our work session earlier this week, and actually yesterday. And we asked for more information at a work session will be on April 21st as we try to work our way through this process.
Will that meeting be available to the public as well?
Oh,
Councilor?
yes, all of our work sessions and all of our council meetings are open to the public. There won't be space for public comment at work session, but the public forums on 2 Mondays a month are available for comment. Did I miss anything, Councilor Ye?
The only other thing I would say is that the council does not put the liaison, the agency puts that for themselves.
They do, but it has to be approved by City Council. We don't, they have selected John Bradley. He joined us at a previous meeting, but it's not official until it's been approved by City
Okay.
Council.
I don't remember ever.
I don't remember doing that either, but
Um,
apparently we do.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yep, because they are voting members, you're right, Commissioner Lemon.
All right.
You say
Councilors, and can you provide an update on the search for an auditor? I know that might be awkward with Mark here in the room.
Mark would
Sure.
probably be glad if we pick someone so he can go home.
We've gone to background with 2 candidates. One was not disqualified, but we've dropped one just because of residency issues. He's from another country and doesn't look like we could get him hired here to work in Eugene and get all the visas and everything. So it's down to one candidate who I think was one of the top candidates, and we are proceeding with finishing up the backgrounds.
What sort of timeline is expected?
Well, that's going to probably take a few more weeks at least to finish up the backgrounds. Those are pretty extensive processes. And then it'll have to come back to council for final approval to make a job offer.
And as I understand it, interim auditor Gissner's contract ends April 24th, 6th, 25th, right in the middle. Wow.
How many days a week?
What is the plan for that gap period?
We haven't made one right now, but we could always have an interim from one of the existing staff. I don't know if it's possible to extend Mark's contract a little longer. That could be, if he's willing, could be another option. We're just working our way through the process.
Thank you, councilors. We'll move into commissioner comments, and I'm going to start with Commissioner Rady this evening.
Okay, 2 things. One, the demonstration Saturday, while not well organized, turned out 5,000 people. And I want to thank Eugene Police Department for their usual lovely, low-key, friendly, and easy presence. Hardly visible and no problem for anybody involved. I saw many people coming up and thanking them. And I think they had one guy maybe a little unclear in his head, wandering out into the street too much, and they persuaded him not to do that, and that's all there was. And that's lovely. I want to report that There is the germ of an idea that I have been passing around. We had a discussion last time in which Vice President Shivers and Commissioner Lehman both made some points, and I did, about the fact that we have a really good and solid system for looking at complaints against officers in the city that takes us step by step, all the way up to the point where the question is resolved. Did they or did they not do something about policy? And then, as far as the public goes, that's the end of the story. We don't know what happens after that. And that has always been a problem for me. But the question of officer confidentiality of their personnel records is also a very serious issue and can't be just lightly tossed aside. And between remarks made by Vice President Shivers, suggesting that maybe the auditor could have a look at this, if not the public, and or maybe the CRB could have a look at this and not the public. And I spoke about this with the head of the union, Michael Clues, who told me that, well, you know, people on the CRB come and go and don't have any real long-term or professional attachment to maintaining the rules of confidentiality. There's nothing that can be done if someone just decides, all right, I quit and I'm going to denounce these 4 people who did this, that, and the other by name. But the auditor is a professional employee of the city. And if they leave the job, they might want to do the same job somewhere else. So they have many reasons to maintain confidentiality. And that if the auditor could, in the yearly report, answer one question: are you satisfied with the status of discipline inside the department? Are you dissatisfied with it? And the auditor would be given the information about the discipline outcomes for those cases which were the high-profile public interest cases, not all the, you know, I saw someone run a light, you know, or someone spoke rudely to me stuff. And that would be adequate from my point of view to satisfy my concerns, that someone has an eye on it outside of the department all the way through, start to finish. And Michael responded that he didn't entirely hate the idea, which was my maximum goal. I was hoping to get that. And I talked to the chief, and he also did not see any immediate major problems with it, though obviously it needs more discussion. I'm going to work on this some more. I hope to have a proposal to bring to the commission for recommendation on this. It will also have to involve, obviously, the auditor's office. So some other discussions will have to take place, but I just wanted to let people know that. And and I got a communication from the Black Thistle folks. And we set up a meeting, and then they had to cancel, but we are going to reset up the meeting, and I will let people know if anything comes of that. I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner Reedy. Councilor Ye, any commissioner comments?
Oh, I also was at the rally and I had the chance to speak to some officers who were in the city hall. And I understand that they were doing overtime to be there. And so I just want to, and I told them, but also just express in the meeting how I understand that it's not optional, but I still appreciate them being there. And it was really important for the crowd to know that there were folks there. So thanks to that.
Commissioner Lyman.
Well, I saw some good drone footage of the protests, but they had to be illegal based on what we learned recently about what items taken from and et cetera. And then, yes, I agree that it is a whole, I'd love to see filled. I think Commissioner Rady's suggestion is an interesting and creative one. And sure, I that would be something to close that loop. So go for it. Thank you.
Councilor Groves, any commissioner comments?
I do not.
Commissioner Meal.
Just that I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I have a very sick dog, and so he's on the couch next to me. Very sad. But thank you for allowing me to be here virtually. Thanks.
Vice Chair Shivers.
Yeah, to address the idea of the CRB getting some insight into the discipline process, I've heard the objection before that they might take any objections they have to the media, and they'll be able to name officer names and XYZ, and that's already a problem. So I don't like it's already a possibility, I should say, and it has proven not to be a problem. So I find that objection holds very little water to me. I think having civilian oversight, or rather insight in this instance, into discipline is the goal, not just that somebody somewhere has some insight. Because uh, as as you're saying, Jack, the auditor does have incentive not to kick up a fuss because they have to keep their jobs. Um, and I don't think that's a good incentive to have when the goal is oversight. Um, yeah, and I trust the process to give us CRB members who have the community's best interest at heart. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Folks.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Neal, please send your dog all of our well wishes. I hope it gets better soon. Into the Eugene Police Citizens Academy, if you haven't checked that out or have any interest in any way, shape, or form, I highly recommend it. Our presenters have been very thorough, articulate, and funny. And I've learned so much about EPD as a whole. So if that is something you have any interest in, I would highly recommend it. It is a great program thus far. So thank you.
And this weekend, we get to go out to the range and learn about the guns. Counselor?
Could I ask a question? Regarding the CRB looking at personnel files and disciplines, have we checked legally the PECBA, the Public Employee Collective Bargaining Act, to see what is and is not allowed there? That might be a good spot to check before we get too far down this road.
So when you say we,
As anybody.
okay, because I know I sure haven't. I see Commissioner Rady making notes. DC Adams, did you have a comment?
No comment, other than that's a real good idea.
Thank you.
I've dealt with that a few times.
I bet you have, as former fire chief. Commissioner Rady, do you have the information you need to move forward with that bit of research?
I do believe,
Excellent.
and if not, I think I can find them.
Thank you, Counselor. We'll go into the chief's report, which will be delivered to us this evening by acting in capacity.
Yeah, I suppose acting capacity.
Okay.
I'm gonna stay with Deputy Chief. Or how about
Deputy Chief
just
Sean
SWAT
Adams.
team? Yeah, there you go. Apologize, Chief Skinner couldn't be here tonight. He actually has vacation. He's out for his birthday, so good for him getting some time away, which that's. Well, I've got more, let's just put it that way. So, not that it's a race, but everything's a competition with the chief, I'll tell you that, we know that, so. I just want to touch upon the law enforcement mental health and wellness subcommittee for a minute. Because I don't get an opportunity to come here and see you guys a whole heck of a lot. Right about the beginning of the year, the latter part of last year, the chief and I sat down and divvied out some of our areas of responsibility. And one of the things that we looked at was our internal wellness and what we're doing with our wellness funds and how we're triaging and coordinating what we're doing with that. And we came up with the determination that the chief was handling it formally, but that's just too broad and too big for the chief. And ultimately, I took that role on. So I have now taken on the spearhead of our internal wellness programs. And I'm really excited to share a couple things with the commission. First and foremost, we are in the process of building a wellness center here within HQ. And so when I say wellness center, I'm talking about a soft area for officers to go and just decompress, spend some time away. When we have a major traumatic event, it would be an area where we can go and just collect ourselves. And we can also hold any critical incident debriefs or other things in there. So
It's still being configured. It's gonna be upstairs, basically right above us here. And that's being done through community safety payroll tax funding. So fortunately, we had some of that funding carved out for officer wellness, and we're utilizing that in the capacity. Secondly, which I know is something that's really near and dear to this commission, is mental health visits. And what we're looking to do right now is pilot with a provider and have clinician services available to our officers on a voluntary basis. And so I have a little experience in this area with my former agency where we did the very thing that we're talking about doing here, where we would set up blocks of time, voluntary for our officers to sign up or our professional staff, and go and have a visit with a mental health provider. And the mental health provider is a provider, or would be a provider, that has experience in speaking with and talking with police officers. I think we all know around this table and recognize that wearing a uniform or working as a professional staff member in law enforcement is unique, and our challenges are unique. And gosh, over the last 5 years, we can just see exactly how that's changed and become even more unique. And so to have somebody come in that has that background, that experience in those areas is super valuable for us. So we're looking to do that after July 1st, if we can get this off the ground and pilot that. I will tell you, my former agency, we started with opening up, I believe it was 10 blocks of time, we filled up. And so I would anticipate we would see something similar with our agency, with my new home, that our officers would sign up immediately and take on these voluntary wellness checks. And that can advance from there into ongoing therapy. So a couple things in the wellness area that we're really excited about, and how we're triaging what we're doing internally with our wellness program. So it's first and foremost and primary on some of the things we're doing for sure. So really all I have to share tonight. Happy to be here to see you all again.
DC, I had asked you this morning to come prepared to speak to a certain topic, and I'll actually bring it up. There was a video released very recently of officers shooting a young man with autism and cerebral palsy. He was lying on the ground. He was brandishing a knife. He was threatening people who were trying to approach him. But the video shows the cars pulling up lights and sirens, the officers jumping out with guns drawn immediately, and they almost immediately proceed to just firing on him rather than de-escalation.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's very upsetting to that down in Eastern Idaho. He was shot 9 times and currently is in critical condition and had to have a leg amputated.
Mhm.
Can you tell us and our public how that would not happen in Eugene?
Well, there is no guarantees in law enforcement, so let's start there. Allow me the liberty of a few minutes here, because this is not something that we can talk about, and it's just going to take a short period of time. So, what happened in Pocatello, if you've not seen the video, the optics of it are horrible. It's a tragic event. Preventable, I believe so. But as I say that, a few things I want to make it clear. It's not our position over here to judge another police agency, another state of their actions in. We have no idea the officers that are involved, their level of training, their competencies. There's so many things that are involved here that really would be very difficult for me to comment on. I will say, and for those of you that heard me talk about use of force previously, when we look at video, particularly body-worn camera, and I like to refer to it as it's a 2-dimensional image of a 3-dimensional problem. And so in this case, if you see the full video at the very beginning, you have a woman grabbing onto the back of the son, presumably the son, and trying to pull him back. And he has a large knife, and it appears he's going after presumably dad. And in the backdrop, when the officers are encountering the individual, the women are present. So I did not perceive in the video any threat to others present. And quite frankly, one of the things that we teach in confrontation simulations is time equals distance equals options. And this goes to why I can say, you know, as to our training and some of our experiences, because repetition plays into this. This is how we mitigate this. So we use de-escalation, but de-escalation we normally think of as verbally, hey, stop, drop the knife, whatever. We create distance. But one of the things that can happen is we can create distance or time or options by utilizing barriers.
And so, Jack, would you mind if we just do a little demo here? So let's come over here, Jack.
I don't heal quick.
I'm not gonna touch it.
Don't
So
hurt
if we envision if we're here right now, Jack and I are in immediate proximity, right? If Jack was to attack me, there is nothing, there's no time or distance, there's no reaction time, right? So what we do is I'm talking to Jack, what I do is I just kind of, I back away, I de-escalate and I talk or even approach, you know.
Get
but-
in Cena between, or a car.
But here's how our officers will play this out. You create a barrier. And that's one of the most fundamental things that you can do, besides distance. But you can place a barrier between yourself and your threat. And what that'll do for you is that creates your distance, and distance creates time. And when you're into high stress environments, which are constantly evolving, they're constantly changing, one of the most critical things we can do is create time into that incident. Because that allows your brain to engage, it allows you to think, it allows you to verbalize, it allows you to breathe, because as you're verbalizing, you're breathing, and it allows you to think. And so, you know, in a critical nature, when we saw what happened in Pocatello, there's a chain link fence between the knife wielder and the officers. Would our officers have deployed deadly force in that? I do not believe so, because we would have had the benefit of time and distance. We would have recognized it for what it is. Additionally, everybody's got a taser. We carry 40mm foam tip launchers. There's a whole myriad and variety of things and tools that we have at our disposal that we would utilize. I mentioned reps. So one of the things in this community, right, wrong, or otherwise, our officers get a lot of repetitions with individuals that are dealing with mental health crisis. I mean, I'm sorry, guys, when I started my career, to find somebody that was, you know, having a severe mental health episode was once a month. It was really, really, really rare. Our officers are dealing with that on an hourly basis all the time. And so that's how we got to be that position. There's a whole myriad of things that we could talk about, but it doesn't matter. It's here. And this is the evolution of what we're doing with our officers, that they're having to deal with all these complex issues. And so we provide crisis intervention training, a 40-hour class. We have ongoing in-service training where we talk about dealing with those that are in crisis or having some type of mental health episode, recognizing signs and symptoms of somebody that may have some developmental disabled problems or other issues that we can recognize up front. And then, you know, really, if you think about the concept of procedural justice, and I use that in this term, asking and talking to those you're dealing with, hey, what is going on? How can I help? And not immediately jumping right to force decision making. Owen and I showed up on the situation. We're probably walking up and I'm going, hey, Owen, I don't have a taser. I don't carry one as a deputy chief. Sorry, I don't work patrol. Owen, you have a taser. Right. You're less lethal. I'm going to be lethal. You're going to be less lethal. This is how this is going to work out. Right. And so as we're working into these things, we're talking about how do we approach these situations? Sometimes there's just not time and things just unravel and how we do. We go back to the last thing I'll just on this as your central point, how we would mitigate this happening here. The other thing is scenario-based training, and there's no substitute for it. We have a machine upstairs that puts you in a 360 virtual reality environment. Some of you are smiling, Jack. Some of you may have experienced it, where you can go in and you can, without ever stepping foot on the street, we can run you through these type of scenarios. We're smart. We're going to look at what happened in Pocatello, and we're going to go, how do we develop training around this so it doesn't happen here? How do we teach our officers to mitigate this type of threat and not this kind of thing happening here? And so scenario-based training is the last thing that I'll just touch upon. That we're constantly training. We're constantly watching the things that are happening across the country, and how do we become better from watching, you know, what may be a mistake from another agency.
Let me just comment, first of all, that I asked you to come prepared, and holy smokes, be careful what you ask for, Chair Hawkins. So,
Well, it's worth 20 years of teaching confrontation simulations and running programs and teaching use of force. I mean, there's a lot of things that I may have some experience in. This may be the area where I may have more depth than any other.
excellent. Commissioner Rady?
Yeah, I think one part of the answer to your question that wasn't touched on is the Salisbury case immediately comes to mind, that in Eugene, we had a situation with a deranged, suicidal young man with a knife who was the family, he had poisoned himself. He was going out into the park to die when the police arrived, that the family had called for help. And he said, "Kill me, man," and advanced with the knife. He was shot with, I believe, beanbag rounds or sponge tip rounds. And that didn't work. So he was shot with an assault rifle, like 10 times and killed. And after that, I think there was a major rethinking inside the Eugene Police Department, because that was when the tasers came in. And that was when there was a thinking, the Police Executive Research Forum, did I get that right? I think I did. Had an article called Re-Engineering Training that was all about use of force and previous models of how to deal with someone with an edged weapon. If they're within 21 feet, shoot them, because they can get to you and kill you before you can draw your pistol otherwise. And many chiefs said, well, what that results is we get a call, there's a deranged person with a screwdriver standing there on his porch. We roll up, get out of the car, walk up to within 21 feet, and then shoot him off the porch. The British, who have the same number of edged weapons in their country, although not firearms, and the same number of people mentally ill, so they do it differently. That is, if they're dangerous in 21 feet, don't get within 21 feet. They come toward you, back up, get behind a car, get behind a garbage can, call for help. You don't have a firearm in England, for one thing, so that removes that option. And there are other ways to do this. Get more resources. I saw one video of English police taking a guy with a knife down by 6 or 7 or 8 of them got shields and just mobbed him from all sides until they had him on the ground, and then he gave up. It was a bad job. But I think in answer to your question, why this would be far less likely to happen in Eugene is that there's been an evolution in doctrine and understanding in the department. And I may, my view of that is like this, but I think there's some truth in it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lyman?
Thank you. DC Adams, thank you for your report. My question is about the mental health option for your officers. The block of 10, I caught a hint that it's not going to happen here in this building, is it?
No.
Okay, and then can it be in a where they don't have to sign up and you have to know, you just know the 10 slots are taken, or do they have to disclose that they're doing it?
Let me just answer a few of those questions. We're still working on some of the idea or thoughts behind this pilot project, but it's not successful if we tried to do it here, or if any way, shape, or fashion that is communicated back to us. This has to be purely external from the police department. That's number one. And number two, there can't be a feedback mechanism here, because that becomes a barrier to individuals seeking out exactly what we're trying to accomplish. So it would be at a clinician's office. You would sign up anonymously on a web page with that clinician. And then you would go and see that.
That's the correct response. I just wanted to clarify that that's your approach to it, because yes, you want to encourage them to do it.
Yes, sir.
So.
Where is the delineation between being a mandatory reporter versus trying to keep that confidentiality, when in this case, the authorities that a mandatory reporter would call would be the person's work, the patient's workplace?
Yeah, I can't tell you where that delineation would be specifically. That would have to come from our clinician. That would have to say, hey, look, there's a life-threatening aspect of this, and how do we report that out to the police? That part I don't know.
Is there an option for them to contact an alternate law enforcement agency like OSP or Lane County, or?
More likely than not, no. So,
Interesting.
yeah, and that's why there's all pieces here. This is why we call this a pilot. These are some of the things that we're going to have to discuss. We're going to have to work out, what do we do if we run into that type of worst case scenario? So stay tuned on that.
Excellent.
All thoughts for him.
Well, it's certainly an exciting pilot, and I'm glad to hear and thank you very much for your detailed explanation of this.
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
Is there a specific mandatory reporting around Leo's getting counseling, or it would just be any mandatory reporter? If they hear something that's mandatory, they have to report it.
It would probably fall under any mandatory reporter requirement.
Okay, so
I
then.
think probably, because I don't know for sure.
Sure, but just pushing that a little bit on what the chair is saying, then, if you do have officers with significant or otherwise, issues and they're seeking treatment, the idea is that you won't know. I mean, the mandatory reporting is pretty specific and, it's this, or you don't have to report. And, for example, an officer expressing suicidal thoughts would not be something that the department's going to learn about. It's hopefully something that the officer's going to get help and address, I believe this is.
Let me just, if I could take a moment, let me peel back the curtain a little bit, because we've had a very similar experience here. And previously, what happens is the officers that are interacting with that officer that may be in crisis are raising the flag to us, external from anything else. And so we saw this in the most recent incident where we had some significant concerns that were raised. We went through our risk management and human resources department. We set up some external fitness for duty testing and worked out officers through that process. And that was all brought from the ground level of the agency, communicating upward and outward that, hey, we see some issues here. So just, when you're working with others in very close quarters with an extreme situation or an extreme environment of trust, officers will be absolutely 100% attuned to anything that may be amiss. And we have opened up within this organization, we've absolutely opened up those communication lines to our peer support team. And most of the time when it reaches my ear and I ask peer support, hey, they're already all over. And that happens in an area that doesn't even touch us at the executive level, up to the point where we're looking at something where we have a fitness. So.
And my point only to be that that is the appropriate place to learn it organically, internally, not necessarily from someone seeking mental health.
Yes.
That you wouldn't rely on the mandatory reporting provision to learn about the potential threat to well-being of one of your own. So that was it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Lemon. We'll move into the Law Enforcement Mental Health Wellness Subcommittee update, which I believe DC Adams got a jump ahead on you, Commissioner Reed.
Sure did. This is great. Makes my job so much easier, which probably will not take long. The subcommittee, aided enormously by Sergeant Jordan, at this point has 3 out of 5 important areas for a policy on officer mental health and wellness. Dealing with the wellness aspects that Deputy Chief Adams just told us about the peer counseling, about various other things that we have. The department does not have a policy on mental health and wellness yet. We're working on that. We have a draft now, but it is doing most of the things that we found other departments are doing and actually have policies for. So what Sergeant Jordan has done is consolidate all that into a draft that covers the first 3 aspects of a policy. And we should have that it was in your packet. If anyone has anything they would like to suggest, add, ask, etc. about it, we can do that right now, and that'll be great. These are basically the low-hanging fruit. There are 2 other issues to be dealt with that are not in this, one of which is specifically about the mental health professional, whether directly employed by the department. We don't have language about that yet, and there's some different approaches. And I've drawn the personal conclusion that while I had heard a lot of from different sources that there was a different approach than was being proposed, that the chief seemed to be very determined that he was going to do this. And while I think I'm pretty clever, I don't think I'm necessarily the best informed person about this department. And if the chief really wants to do it, I think it's kind of silly for me to say, well, no, but I've heard it's not a great idea. And, try it, see if it works. And it's far better happening at all than to not have it, or, wait to see if we can do it my way instead. But that's yet to be written into the policy. And the last part which is going to take a broader discussion than just the commission. We'll have to probably involve the chief's office, the union, the city attorney's office, and the like, which is the question of administrative leave for officers for critical incidents that are not officer-involved shootings. And the use of administrative leave policy. And this is going to take wider discussion and is not yet ready to put into policy. But that's essentially where we're at with the subcommittee. We hope to have a policy to bring to this body, if not this summer, certainly early in the fall. I think that's realistic. We may be able to do it sooner. I mean, Sergeant George is convinced we can do it a whole lot sooner than that. Sergeant McCauley comes in and steps in for her as policy sergeant. So that may very well be true. I'm just giving us space because I don't want to promise something and then, say, oh, well, we're going to get it done soon. I'd rather give myself more space than less. You want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just wanted to kind of, I guess, tag along on that and the update you already kind of gave. So I would say that, yeah, we're really close to having a draft that's even more complete than this one that's included in your packet. But if there's any feedback you have in this initial document, please feel free to share that. That is designed to be kind of the overarching umbrella of kind of just the administration of the wellness policy. And obviously it hadn't been totally vetted within the department yet, but that's the intention of it. It will kind of outline what all of our wellness programs are. The other draft policies that are kind of pending, we have, let's see, the acute stress adaptive protocol, which is ASAP. This is it's a program that has to do with EMDR. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It's kind of like a desensitization and reprocessing technique that is used for people to kind of almost repack how traumatic memories are stored. And it's been highly successful. It's been implemented in other departments. So we're basically probably actually in the similar stages of development of that policy. We already have 7 members of our PSRT team trained to administer this. And so it's pretty promising. Let's see, I made some notes. It is peer-led EMDR. And I mean, I don't know if anybody has any questions about that just off the top.
Is there a good source to go to learn more about that? I don't want to take time here. But...
No, I don't necessarily have a good one to guide you to, but it is widely used and widely accepted. So if you just get online and look up EMDR, it's
use the Google.
Use the Google machine.
It's very widely used in the military.
Yes, I mean, yes, and across, yeah, just even I say regular people that are not in paramilitary organizations. Everybody's finding success with it, so you shouldn't have an issue finding.
The purpose of it is to reduce PTSD.
Right, I got that. I just
Yeah.
want to know more
Yeah,
what's inside the black box.
You don't want.
It's kind of like somebody asked about it and said, what is, describe it simply. It's kind of like how we used to defrag our computers. You know, you break it all down, you build it back up and pack it in nicely so it's less stressful and stress inducing when you re-experience it. So, and we do, I think the intent is that it's going to be used in conjunction with our critical incident stress debriefs, which will come in for that other policy. The other thing we have is alpha stim devices, which have to do with, it's called cranial electrotherapy stimulation. And that is FDA approved in the United States for anxiety, insomnia, and pain. It is approved in other countries for depression, but not the US yet. So we have, I think, plans to obtain some units. And there's some other details being worked out, but this is going to be another thing that will be utilized by our officers if they so choose and if they are able to. And so there's a policy in draft mode there as well. We already talked about the wellness room, which is super. I know they're focusing on a lot of aspects of that, like the massage chair and getting healthy lighting, all that stuff. And I know the comm center already has one of those, so that's good. And then one last thing I would say, I don't know if we're going to have a policy about this, but we do have a new app that we've rolled out, which has to do with wellness. It's for officers to be able to quickly access resources for various types of wellness, anger management, stress, insomnia, even fitness and nutrition. So, as far as I know, most people have already downloaded it. People are already actively using it. So it's been a good resource too.
Good dog.
And there's a Comfort Canine program draft policy as well. So that one is going to take a little bit more effort and discussion to implement because there are some, with the union and that sort of thing. So, but by next month, I would say, or the month after, we should have at least 3 complete, including that draft policy for the actual overarching mental health and wellness program. We should have complete drafts of these other Alpha STEM and the ASAP stuff, and the Comfort Canine stuff, just to be determined later how we'll implement that. So,
See a hand up from Commissioner Folks.
Thank you. I have quite a few, if that's all right. The EMDR is phenomenal, a phenomenal tool personally. Not only does it assist with current or past traumas, but moving forward, future, it just gives you a toolbox to walk into things a little more guided, so that you're not building on even more trauma. It's pretty great. So the fact that you all are looking into that is just, to me, it's astounding and really progressive, and I applaud EPD for looking into that as a tool. Also with, I wanted to just clarify with the the mental health committee, this specific policy, and I'm only bringing this about because I struggled with my own understanding. So for the folks out there that are watching, this policy is specific to EPD staff, their mental health and wellness, and making sure that they're taken care of and supported with the work that they do, which is very traumatic and stressful. And also, one of the beautiful things about the policy that was explained to me that I didn't even think about, which maybe you all already have, is that it's putting it on paper and writing for future generation, future officers and future staff that come in, that yes, we have protocols in place. This is something we support. This is something we honor. So the leadership at EPD, I'm really impressed with you all and taking this and moving forward and already kind of jumping ahead, and appreciate both Chair Hawkins and Chair Rady for this specific work group on all their hard work. And specifically, Commissioner Rady has put in a lot of time and effort into researching varying departments within the West Coast and just all over, doing research, ton of research. The man has put in a lot of effort. So thank you all for bringing this about. This is a really fantastic piece of policy to see moving forward. So thank you.
can I add one more thing? I'm so sorry, I forgot. So all of this is in the hands of Sergeant McCauley, who we talked about previously, Sergeant Sean McCauley. I want to make sure that, let's see, the draft that you have here of critical incident, I would like, if anybody has any feedback on that, I think that there is an updated one that will be incorporated as per Sergeant McCauley's recommendations. So he's pretty much the subject matter expert at this point, and so just keep that in mind as you read through.
The first is that, in your moment. The first is that at our next meeting of the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Subcommittee, Sergeant McIntyre is going to come and tell us about a conference that 4 officers in the department went to down in San Diego that dealt exactly with these kind of issues. And that should be quite interesting to see what other people are doing and what's reported as working and maybe what doesn't work. The second, boy, I'm really having trouble right now. Sorry.
It's just because we're all staring at you.
That's it. I'm being complimented, working so hard. Now I forget everything. Yeah. Pass for the moment. I'll get it in a moment.
Okay.
further discussion of the draft policy?
Oh, yeah, one thing.
Yes.
I think we have to, two things. The one is that the one thing that will have to be corrected in the draft policy that you have is that it calls specifically for a director of the wellness program in the department. And everyone I talked to in the department said, no, we can't add a slot. You know, we're having to run this severe budget pressure. But in fact, two people are doing exactly this, and I don't care what they're called. We'll just have to change the language a little. But I think we'll have to amend it because I believe there should be language in there saying that if two people are responsible for one thing, they cannot have the same name. That is just.
They're spelled differently.
They're spelled
One's
differently?
a Mick and one's a Mac.
Okay. Mick and Mac. Maybe we should just call them Mick and Mac.
Yeah.
That would clarify everything.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Reedy. I will say that the efforts that you put in, Sergeant Jordan, have been absolutely amazing because you whipped this thing out and you made it look really, really easy. And from the year and a half or so that I led the law enforcement mental health and wellness subcommittee before appointing Chair Reedy, I know how much work goes into that blood, sweat, and tears just on our part of it as civilians, let alone the people that we think we're trying to help by making these policies. So thank you very much to Sergeant Jordan and Commissioner Reedy. All right. So we'll move into policy review. And this particular policy was very high on our work plan that we created 2 years ago in our work retreat. So for emerging technology, and this is one that actually Vice Chair Shivers, he was aware that the policy existed. I was not. Several of us commissioners actually were not aware that there was a policy specifically for this. And so we reviewed a lot of technology and called it emerging. However, now we know that there is actually an emerging technology policy. This 1206, the Police Commission identified the topic of emergent technology as number 10 on their fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 work plan. Just as a reminder, number 10 does not necessarily mean that it was 10th in priority, because we had several items that were weighted almost identically. And so we had a bunch of 8-way ties, sort of things like that. So number 10 doesn't mean that there were 9 things that we thought were more important. This policy guides how Eugene Police implements and utilizes new technology and especially considers public safety, functionality, and constitutional rights of the public. While this policy truly functions as a set of guidelines and has very few specifics, the policy needs to be updated both due to age. It was last updated July 1st, 2015, and relevance in a world with ever-evolving technology. In addition, this policy acts as a basic framework for technology implementation, including standard practice in the law enforcement industry. So Sergeant Jordan has included for us the draft policy 1206, and then also the red line, blue line version of the draft with the track changes turned on. I will entertain a motion to approve the draft.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Groves. And now we can open the floor for discussion on policy 1206. Commissioner Reedy.
Yeah, 1206.2 definitions. The expression or market widening phases of business confuses hell out of me. What does that mean?
Well, I think that speaks to the fact that often we get new technology that's kind of in the still development or implementation phase where it's not been widely applied, but kind of like how drones were when they came on the scene. You know, we started where we had very limited options for which drones we could use. And then, you know, as that industry developed, we had more things to choose from. We had better technology to choose from. So often we're not implementing technology that was invented 20, 30 years ago. We're implementing it as it's developing itself in the market. So I think that's what it speaks to.
Others, Commissioner Reedy?
Not really. The rest of it is very straightforward. That's still, I mean, I can imagine something that was developed and was out there, but it wasn't widely used and it wasn't being marketed widely because it's a very specific kind of thing. The phrase just strikes me as odd, but it's not a big deal.
Vice Chair Shivers?
Yeah, so during our conversation about the security cameras downtown a few months back, when I was talking about the other policy where a blanket, not going to say prohibition, but a blanket caution against using facial recognition technology or AI technology would be appropriate. I thought that this policy would be a good place for that. Um, I don't know if everybody agrees with me, but I'd love to add, at the very least, uh, a couple of lines in the considerations before new technology is adopted that specifically, or maybe more specifically, if not explicitly, address AI and facial recognition technology.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Vice Chair Chivers, since the chief has repeatedly given us his personal assurance that facial recognition technology will not be used by Eugene Police Department. Sergeant Jordan, do you have a response?
No, we have that covered in our public safety camera policy, but we could certainly add it in if it would be, I don't think we intend to use it in any form or fashion. I'd have to really dig into that, but I don't think it's in congruence with anything we want to do. And I think, let's see, I'm gonna scan through this and I know that we have some caveats in here about we're not going to use any technology in ways that violate individuals' expectations of privacy and violate constitutional rights, things like that. But we could spell it out if that would make it easier. That's an easy one to put in, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the chief's direction has been consistent. We will
Yeah.
not use facial recognition. I
Right.
think to Commissioner Shivers' point,
Mhm.
I think it's a great place to put it, frankly.
Yeah, and to be clear, the reason that I think this would be a more appropriate place than somewhere like the public cameras policy is because we don't know how the many ways in which technology is going to develop that folks might want to use it in. And so the emerging technologies policy seems like the broadest umbrella to put it under, whereas like saying no AI in the body worn cameras section wouldn't prohibit the use of AI in the drones section or in the recruitment section, that kind of thing.
I would agree with that. I have questions from Commissioner Neal and then Commissioner Lyman.
I think that this will just be a clarification question, but in that same section for considerations before new technology is adopted, in E and F of section 1E and F. So there's meant to be a summary public concern and then a plan to address public concern. And then there's also meant to be plan to solicit public input. So I'm just curious, like how you develop an idea of public concern before public input. Is it concerns that can be documented from other jurisdictions and other implementation?
Well, I would actually probably defer to our command. But what I would say is I anticipate it would be actually from our community. So it would be some sort of meeting or session to solicit input on a technology that we are planning on adopting or attempting to adopt and implement. And then using that forum to solicit the input, gather that input, evaluate it, and then address those concerns either at a later date or at that time.
Yeah, this policy doesn't need to probably talk about implementation of the policy itself, but I think there's some like, I don't know, reorganization of those bullets, because it seems like the first thing that you would do is solicit public input and then have like lessons from that, and that they aren't necessarily they aren't 3 bullets, but it's more like 1 bullet. I'm not sure exactly what the solution is for the policy language, but it seems a little, to me, this reads as the person who's preparing this set of test project descriptions would sort of scan where this has been implemented to come up with a summary of public concerns, and then also have a plan to have public input. And if that's not the intention, then I sort of think the language should change a little bit. Is that clear?
Commissioner Lyman and then Vice Chair Shivers.
Thank you. This is directed at Vice Chair Shivers and his suggestion. We were talking about AI, but we're talking about facial recognition, and we're taught that's very different things, and one is way broader than the other. And when the policy was being discussed, I'm thinking about the use of AI in terms of the back office, in terms of the dispatch or the virtual meet that when you don't have a meeting with the actual officer to respond to something. I mean, there's ways that it may be utilized. And when I heard Vice Chair Shivers, I just channel our past chair, Dallas, may his memory be for a blessing, but it's like, write it if you want it, suggest it, because I wouldn't put it on Sergeant Jordan it's not clear whether it's AI, whether it's facial recognition and stuff. So I would just suggest that, that would be helpful to advance what you're looking for to suggest it. So thank you.
Vice Chair Shivers.
Yeah, I'm happy to write something up and send it to Holly to send it out to everybody, as well as the mailing list. So if anybody is watching this in the future, or we've got the public watching and I don't see it in chat, sign up for the emails from the police department or from the police commission and the city. The reason I raised my hand initially, though, was in response to Clay, as per the public interest and public concern. And I think we often overlook as commissioners that is part of our role. We are the public. So this is the right forum, in my opinion, for folks who do have concerns to come every month to air them. Though obviously always being diligent in seeking public input is important.
I have a follow-up question on that because I can think of two recent emergent technologies. One of them being the MyPD Connect, the app for virtual rave reporting of crime, and then the drones as first responders. And I'm curious, at what point do you consider that request for public input satisfied?
I don't know that I can comment on that. I think it depends on the project and the extent of the technology and kind of the impact it has on the community.
So I can
Yeah.
speak to a little bit of this,
Yeah.
and to go to Clay's point, the first thing we're gonna do before we're gonna implement anything is we're gonna watch and see what other agencies are doing, what other communities are seeing. But you also have to keep into consideration that this is a unique community that we're all living in and policing. And so we have to bring that to bear as well. But it all becomes a little bit of a balancing act, so to speak, in that as a chief of police, the chief has to recognize those things that in other entities or other areas or within this community, knowing and understanding the community would raise some concerns. And those will be the ones where, hey, we maybe need to have a pause and we need to have some input on this versus something that is so in your face good, such as MyPD Connect. I mean, this is the form right here. If there's concerns, it would be heard here, and then we can move that forward. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, and the chief's not here, but that one falls right at the feet of the chief of police. I mean, he has to have the connections to the community and the understanding, and I know Chief Skinner does. And I know he asks those questions of our community about some of the things we're doing, and I know some of you have had online or one-on-one conversations with him about some of the things we're doing. So there's a little bit of everything involved here in everything that we're talking. I don't believe there is a one-size-fits-all. In other words, you have to punch it into a policy that says, anytime we're going to put any emergency technology out there, it has to go to some kind of public hearing. And I'm not suggesting that's what I'm hearing. I'm just saying that that is one of the things that would be a consideration, because there are those that we would not really seek out deep public comment.
So with that in mind, DC Adams. We did, as the police commission, we did have an opportunity to review the My PD Connect when it first rolled out,
Yep.
and it certainly had the bells and whistles, and we were just as awestruck by it as a lot of folks were. With the drones as first responder, though, I remember the community being informed about it more than being asked about to weigh in.
Yep.
So if this would be an example of why no input is sought, then where do we find the explanation as to why no input is sought?
If I understand the question, where do we find the answer in policy? I don't know that we can.
Well, since the policy says that if no input is sought, explanation as to why no input is sought. So if we wanted to know, hey, we have this drones as first responders policy now, none of us had a say in that. Who or where would we go to get that explanation?
I think that would have to be the chief.
Okay.
So,
And to Vice Chair Shivers' point, the police commission, yeah, I think we are viewed as that first step to that community, since part of our charter from the city council is to liaise with the community and represent the community's opinions and perspectives. Vice Chair Shivers.
Yeah, I also want to point out that you know, we have a cycle every 2 years we decide on our next work plan, and we often put something in those work plans saying like, hey, if something important happens, we usually call it like emerging issues. If an emergent issue pops up that we need to address quickly, we reserve space on our work plan for that. We did not a couple of years ago, but that's something to be thinking about as we head into our next work plan. And for those emerging issues that did pop up over the last 2 years that we did not have the work plan capacity to address, we can always bring that up on the next work plan. So if there are any concerns about policies that have been written since then or over the last 2 years, I think the explanation for why we haven't looked at it yet is that we didn't decide to. So I don't think anybody's going to stop us if we go back to it this time around. Thank you.
Sure. Councilor Yang.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that many years ago, before some folks were on police commission, we did have presentations on a very new drone program. So when it was an emerging technology, there was communication with the commission and with the public about, you know, this new technology and, you know, how we were researching it and the potentials of where it might go. I know that probably with some of these emerging technologies, that kind of gets lost over time because, you know, we're only on this commission so many years. And so it's hard to have that institutional memory. I'm not sure how we solve for that, where people might think, well, I've never heard about this before, but it did come up and there were conversations. It's just that the technology, it took time to get to an implementation point. And I don't, but yeah, just to keep that. I don't want the public that might be listening to think that all of a sudden the drones were flying all over the place. That's not exactly how it happened.
Thank you for providing that background.
Absolutely.
Being one of those new commissioners myself, it's important for me to know that. Thank you.
No problem.
So, Vice Chair, keeping honest here as far as Robert's rules, we have a motion on the table. Do we need to move to table that?
Yeah, in order to close business, we'll have to move to table it. Though I am also comfortable accepting it as it is and making these changes and then adding something next time. As like, if we want to bring it back, we can just put it on the agenda again.
I think I would rather table it and bring it back at the next meeting because I think it is important to make sure that the documentation aligns with the chief's verbal commitment that he's provided us several times. All right, then I will move to table review of this policy until we have the edits suggested by the commissioners and Vice Chair Shivers written into the next draft that Sergeant Jordan will provide to us. Seconded by Commissioner Rady. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. None opposed. Are there any abstentions? Seeing none, we will close that agenda item summary. So the next policy for our review this evening is one that I have been warned by Sergeant Jordan is a hefty one. So this is limited English proficiency services. This is another one, of course, that was put on our work plan at our work retreat 2 years ago as identified as number 12, again, with many of these multi-way ties, not necessarily the ranking of its priority. The Police Commission requested to review limited English proficiency services policy 368 during their April Police Commission meeting. This policy is critical to the department's ability to provide quality public safety services to every person in our community. The policy is critically overdue for revision based on age. It was last updated June 24, 2009. And to ensure the comprehensive list of limited English proficiency assistance available is accurate and updated along with the various governing legal provisions related to individual policy sections are up to date. And so we have in our packets, the draft and the blue line draft provided by Sergeant Jordan. I'll entertain a motion to for policy 368.
Move to adopt.
Thank you for that motion, Commissioner Rady. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Groves. And we are now open for discussion on limited English proficiency services, policy 368. Sergeant Jordan, do you have background to provide for us on the edits that you have proposed so far?
Yes, so what I wanted to share with the commission is this policy, in all my research, things are a little topsy-turvy right now with the federal government's guidance on
One way to put it.
limited English proficiency. So what I want you to know is that we are very committed to providing excellent service to our community that has its own demographic breakdown, and that what I would advocate is that most of this not change despite what guidance might be, like I said, federally. That being said, most of this, I've cross-checked all of these kind of citations in terms of the Title VI and accessibility stuff. All of that's still very accurate and very good to go. What I am checking on now is this 4-factor analysis. If you go to page 42 of the packet, page 2 of this policy, or yeah, that's the marked up version. I'm still verifying with our greater City of Eugene guidance, because I think it's very important we're all in, kind of conjunction with each other. We need to be doing the same thing. And so I'm in the process of verifying if that's still best practice. As far as I can tell, that is still best practice for law enforcement purposes. However, that being said, the question comes down to, do we do our own demographic study of our community, which is what this policy kind of dictates right now, that we have a LEP coordinator who does a study of the demographics and says, these are the primary languages we need to be able to translate and interpret for. I kind of feel like that's probably a little outdated, and I feel like our city probably does that. So that's kind of still TBD, that part. And right now we provide translation and interpretation services either through employees who are certified or through, other departments who have certified employees for Spanish and ASL. Other than that, if we encounter a person who speaks in a different language than that, we have Language Line, which is an excellent service. Our dispatch uses that. Officers all are provided cards to log in and to be able to be connected with an interpreter, a translator of whatever language the person that we're interacting with needs. And that includes victims, suspects, average citizens that call in and have questions, all of the whole gamut of anybody we contact. All of that being said, sorry, I wanted to say one more thing. We have currently 16 people at EPD who are certified Spanish speaking translators, I believe. And I don't know, I think we have, I can't speculate on how many ASL we have. We do not have very many ASL resources within the department. So I think that was everything. All of these procedural portions, nothing there should change. Other than we also need to shore up some of this language around training and make sure that we're doing our annual refreshers. We do not have an LEP coordinator. And honestly, I don't think that's necessary at this point. We have so many documents that are translated that we utilize. We have a really smooth process for how we can access translation services, and it's kind of just built into it, what we do every day. It's not a novel thing anymore where we're, it's not a new program that's unveiled by the federal government and saying, you need to comply with this now. This is mainstream and this is normal for us. So that's where I'd leave that.
Hands all over the place. All right, we'll start with Councilor Yang and then Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering if someone can request a translator that is not a staff person that they prefer.
I think they can either, it's in here somewhere, and I'm sorry. It's a long policy. I know that I've read in here that they can either accept the translator provided or provide one at their own expense, supposedly.
Okay, so we won't provide one that's not a staff person.
No, I
for
mean,
them.
we would offer that. I think we would always say, okay, if language line is acceptable, we would go to that as well. That's a service we pay for, and that's not a staff person.
Right. So that would be an option.
Yeah. And I know officers get creative, and depending on the scenario, they'll use Google Translate, and that's acceptable. Or if the person has a connection in the community, and or just an average, citizen it just depends on the context of the contact, because we want it to be appropriate. We don't want it to alter the outcome of a criminal case.
Right.
We don't want victims and suspects to be, so that's the caveat.
Yeah.
But
that
yeah,
makes sense.
here,
Okay, great. That was
That's
my
in
question.
section 368.4. Commissioner Reed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I found nothing that caught my attention in the reading through the policy, but my experience on one of the ride-alongs, I had an experience with 3 officers who encountered a person at a park when they were responding to a call, the person in the park who was threatening people with a bicycle chain. And when they arrived, the suspect did not respond in English, although twice during the confrontation, I heard him speak English and it sounded unaccented, but mostly he was speaking in Spanish, and none of the officers did. And none of them had a language card, and none of them had in their own, capability, just, manos arriba, senor. And I was just wondering, now I was told, look, anybody in any language sees a person, 3 guys in uniform, covered with equipment and weapons, yelling at you and going like this. It doesn't require sophisticated language skills to understand what is being requested. But I was concerned that the officers didn't have a simple language card in which they could tell the guy, drop what you're holding. Sit down, come here, go there, stand, sit, whatever. Just simple things that might have helped de-escalate the situation. And it was not possible to de-escalate it. The guy was in no mood for any de-escalation. But while all these things are provided in here and talk about how they can be accessed, in fact, no one was thinking of that. They were thinking of containing the guy because there were other people present who he was potentially a danger to, and they ended up arresting him. And I was just wondering, in all this, a language card to put in the pocket with all the other gear wouldn't add substantially to the weight, but might be a useful thing. The other question I had was, is there any information in the department as to how often of contacts with people involve someone who is limited English proficiency or not?
I don't know that we have any statistics kept on that. I would be interested to hear myself.
Yep.
We do not. I know we do not.
Yeah. Can I speak to your thing about the language part? I think I understand what you're saying in terms of it would be ideal if we had officers, even if they don't speak Spanish fluently enough to be translators or interpreters, that they could have something to quick reference. I think in a scenario like that, it's probably not safe for officers to be like, hold on, let me get the card out and you know, you're swinging up. Okay, well, so I mean, I think it depends on the scenario then, is what I would say. I know that a lot of people do have enough Spanish skills to communicate in scenarios like that, but it's not necessarily a requirement. Would you, so are you intending that to be kind of a recommendation that
I'm
everybody learn a
thinking
base
that-
level of Spanish, or?
There's numerous references in the policy to how to access
Yeah.
different ways to deal with the situation. And one of them mentioned is, you know,
So I think
Something
the
about
language
story.
card that's mentioned in here is specifically something that was developed to say, which language do you speak?
Ah.
And so it's a card that has, 40, 50 languages or something like that, maybe more. And so it was more of
I would
that.
make off the top of my head guess that a
Mhm.
card in Spanish would cover probably 70 to 80% of the cases that would be encountered. That might be wrong, and you know, but I would just think, you know, I understand that an officer, you know, talking to someone at this distance, you don't want to be, you know, looking at your card, you'll be watching the person, if there's any tension in the situation. But if you're standing, they were further than I am from
Mhm.
you. And one of the three could have pulled out a card and just read off
Okay.
instructions that might not have changed the situation at all, but at least you'd know the guy understands what's going on to this extent.
And I think hopefully in that scenario, somebody would have gotten on the radio, and if they recognize that the person was Spanish speaking, they might be able to call for another officer, any Spanish speakers on duty. And that's kind of a common practice usually, but I wasn't at that situation that you were, so,
I don't
Yeah.
know if that's how it happened.
yeah, okay.
That's just my own experience.
I will actually say that I've been on several ride-alongs as well, and I have not seen this procedure in action. And I've seen multiple cases with individuals who clearly English was not their first language.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious about this as well as far as how widely it's practiced, because I haven't seen it.
Can you clarify what you mean by what part is practiced?
Well, so even trying to determine maybe what language the person is speaking or offering services either through the department or through language line. I've been on calls where, yes, the majority of them were Spanish speakers, but also there was some Mandarin Chinese speakers and things like that. And I have not, to my recollection, observed an officer going to that extent of trying to provide the communication within the person's native language.
Okay. I think often dispatch is the source of a lot of our calls, and that's where officers might become aware of what language translation or interpretation is needed at that point. Because they're the ones taking the call, they're the ones gathering information to give to officers so that they can respond with as much information as possible. Now, if we're talking about a traffic stop where you really don't know who's in the car and you don't know what you're gonna get until you walk up and say, hi, I'm officer so-and-so. So I guess I can't speak to the rest of that because I mean, situationally, it would just depend on circumstances.
No, it's fair, and I'm not asking you to pass judgment on anecdotal,
Yeah.
relations there. I have questions from Councilor Groves and then Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. How's language line working?
As far as I know, it's works pretty great. I don't know if you all have any feedback on any of that.
I've heard nothing but positive.
Yeah.
So is there
It's quick
something we
too.
should be aware of?
Well, I mean, no, I've used it several
Yeah.
times, but this is before we even had cell phones on the
Sure.
rigs, so we had to go through dispatch. Dispatch had to call language line and,
Right.
telephone, telegraph. They kept getting lost in translation. Plus, one of them we were dealing with a Vietnamese family who were Montagnards, so their dialect was slightly different than,
Mhm.
I don't know if you call it regular, Vietnamese.
Mhm.
So there was some issues with that, but I imagine it's easier to use with a cell phone and you're speaking directly.
Absolutely. And every officer gets a card now. They have their own PIN. It's no longer run it through a supervisor and then get dispatched to facilitate. It's a lot smoother. And AIC Lieutenant Griffith was saying, he's observed whole reports be taken in
Yeah, and I saw the report taken entirely in Spanish with
language
the,
line.
the officer standing right there on the phone, holding it back and forth. There's a whole guy assaulted in his garage that was entirely in Spanish.
Well, that's good to hear. I thought it was a great resource. Just
Mhm.
our application was just beyond the chisel and tablet, stone tablet. So it was a little more cumbersome back then.
Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you. Since the topic of language line, there are some competitors in the marketplace. But the one thing I'll say, using them in court, is that the translators are biased. Like, so if they're working for the police and the police are like taking a statement or something, it's gonna come through from that person who randomly got connected with this call. Not every time, but oftentimes it will be conducted from the standpoint of he's telling you that he didn't take, they'll adopt, it won't be, when you look for true interpreting is actually simultaneous. What did that person say? What did that person say? Without anything, the use of language line just in general, because of what it is, because it's probably outsourced, it's now going to be tariffs probably, but you don't know where you're talking to or who you're talking to. And they're not in the situation to know what so it's a grain of salt, but it's a great tool for the officers. But since you asked, I thought I'd share that insight into, I found as a judge trying to get, that I wasn't getting a clean translation. I would often get they think they want to please the customer almost, and then the second thing was that as a public defender in Miami, like you had to learn you had to learn 1 year in the county jail, or, you were going to trial, or, you had to learn a few of the things. And I do kind of agree with Commissioner Rady that it would be, that is the likely encounter for our officers, in terms of needing to communicate something and it could be obviously in a stress, in a high stress situation or a potentially dangerous situation, no, but in a citizen encounter, it would be really nice to just be able to refer to, a few phrases. And it could result in de-escalation. So again, I'll give Ray, I think it's a good idea. So on that.
Common phrases.
Sure, if I can follow up on this.
Absolutely, DC.
I hear both of you, and I also hear Allison. Because it really is, and you even think about nighttime trying to take a card out and read off it. But I think I got one better. Allow us the opportunity to research a survival Spanish course.
Yeah.
So where we bring people in, trainers into our in-service training, and we teach just basic survival Spanish phrases that could be utilized. I don't even know if that's a possibility, but let's research it and get back to you on that. And then look down the road as to if there's something else we can do and find something that works.
I appreciate that, DC.
Sorry. I know you're already looking into this four-factor analysis
Yeah.
situation. So this is probably something you've already thought of, but there can be a difference between the number of people who speak a foreign language and also speak English. Like there can be a population that is smaller, but a higher majority of them don't speak English. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
And so I'm wondering if we can, I don't know, like reading these, if that would be a factor. But it feels like it should be. I know I have been in a situation with my mother-in-law that was interacting with police, and the stress made it, she already had English issues. And they're not going to be speaking her language. She speaks Mandarin and other even less well-known languages. And so, it was very stressful for her, and her English, it like kind of like went out the door, because she's, trying to just concentrate on what is happening. So, having this resource and actually using it, which is not our job here. Our job is to not figure out if policy is being used. So I want to stay in my lane. I do think that this policy actually really matters.
I think so too.
And getting it right, because the consequences down the road of having a bad interaction or the police misunderstanding what someone is saying can go all the way back to a trial, right? And so I really want to make sure we get this one right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this is a great start. I really was reading this, and it's long and I obviously missed a few things, but, I think we're getting there. Like,
And I think the four-factor analysis, I'm really hopeful that, because you see in here, this says, this is outlined in the Department of Justice LEP guidance to federal financial assistance recipients. And so that has changed a little. And so, yes, I'm keenly aware that this may have changed, and I would really like to get a solid footing to make sure we're providing the best service and that we're on the forefront of whatever the best guidance is there, because clearly we want to be
Yeah.
serving the community the best way we can.
do
So
we have to use it? Let's say you find it and you're like, this is crazy because, I mean.
I'm gonna have to run that by the city attorney, basically, is the next question there. So, yeah.
Vice Chair Shivers.
Yeah, I usually try to not bring up problems that I don't have any ideas of a solution for. But I do have some questions around, do we keep a record of households that do have English as a second language so that we know to send calls there, or is that collected each time and not saved?
We do not keep that by household or address. However, I think there is a way for us to delineate that a specific person speaks Spanish potentially, but it's more so with things related to disabilities that we would definitely keep track of. So hard of hearing or ASL preferred or requires this translation service, we would put notes like that into people's name records, but not by address.
Yeah, so the reason I said that I try not to bring up problems that I don't have a solution for is, on the one hand, we want to provide folks the best service we can. On the other hand, we don't want to provide records should the federal government ask for them. So personally, I think we should probably delete those records now and have to recollect them in 4 years, assuming the presidency changes.
Responses, comments,
I
feedback?
can respond to that.
We'll check. No, I got notes. I think this is one, I mean, obviously, there's competing interests that we're all acutely aware of here, and it's a great point for discussion. Because until you mentioned it, unfortunately, I don't think anybody on this side of the table had thought of it.
Yeah.
So, let's get back with the city attorney and talk about our ability to alter a name record, first of all, if we can do it. And if we can't, then changing our practice or policies moving forward. It's a great point. We just have to report back on that one because it's a good point.
Yeah, I figured the answer would be something along those lines. So thank you. Thank you for taking those steps. We appreciate it.
I had one thing.
Yes,
Sarah. So I do want to say about the training thing that I talked about. It sounds like we do have within our defensive tactics training some scenarios that specifically run recruits through, like especially new hires recruits, utilizing Spanish.
Yeah, things
Yes.
like that.
And at least working through that interaction with somebody who speaks Spanish and no English. So, and I don't know, Lieutenant Griffith is in charge of the defensive tactics team, so he might be able to speak more to that. You all learn.
Yeah, I can speak to that scenario if you'd like to hear it.
Absolutely.
Sure. So we've had recruits running through these confrontational simulations all day where force is sometimes being used, and the person they're encountering is in a suit that protects them. So it's, if they are struck or anything like that, there's padding. So the recruits walk up and there's someone getting into a car and they're wearing all the same padding. Recruits' first thought is, oh my goodness, here comes another force scenario. The person turns, we have one of our officers who speaks other languages. He speaks 5 languages. So we kind of pick, depending on the day, what language we're going to have him use. And the recruits, without our help, have to fumble their way through figuring out how to take a report where it turns out this car was broken into. So they go into it thinking, force, here we go. And we want to teach them to read the situation for what it is. This is not a guy who's breaking into the car. This is not a guy who's stealing the car. It's a guy whose laptop was stolen out of the car. So we teach them about the language line. We see if they're nimble enough on their feet to go, I have Google Translate. And most of them do, because most of them are honestly 22 to 28 years old, so they've grown up with Google Translate. So it works out really well, and I'm just starting on the defensive tactics team, and I was really surprised and pleased to see that scenario. It was not one I can take credit for. I was really pleased to see it.
Thank you. And Councilor Gross, let me put you on the spot for a moment as former ESFP. What is the process for that particular version of first response when you arrive on the scene and people don't speak English?
Well, I've been retired for 8 years, but while I was still there, language line was one of our big pieces. Plus, we had hired, at least for Spanish speaking, we had hired quite a few people who could speak Spanish. It got harder with some of the dialects you don't run across very often, but again.
How did you determine what language you needed to get from language line?
That was difficult, but you can actually pick up what they're saying and language line will figure it out for you.
That's interesting. So the language line dispatch will, so they can hear what the person is saying to you and they can identify the language and provide you an interpreter?
Back in my day, they could hear over the radio and then the dispatcher would try and have the phone close enough that they could pick it up. So it was a little more cumbersome back then. It sounds like it's much better now, but that's how we did it.
DC Adams?
Yeah, well, last time I used it, it wasn't all that long ago. The first thing they'll ask you is language line, what language are you looking for? You say you're not sure, stand by. You'd have the person talking to the phone, and whether AI or some sort of magical thing, it would say, is this the language you're looking for, which would get confirmed. Nice. So it has been a little while since I've been on, but that was working pretty famously. And most of the time, when you're talking to individuals, there's at least enough English there that you can get, if you're really paying attention, you can get enough to say, I need Mandarin, for example, I need, and then, you get somebody in the line and go from there. It works pretty darn well.
Yeah, my vision back in those days was there was a bench there with all these different speakers sitting on it. That's one, and they take over. But I mean, that's not how it is.
Interesting.
Yeah, you develop these pictures of things going on.
Okay, Mr. Baseball.
Yeah, somebody's sitting on a bench in the dugout.
All right. So do we want to table this one as well until Sergeant Jordan has the opportunity to do some more research and come back with how the policy can or should align with other agencies? Move to table.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Lyman. All in favor of tabling this policy review, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. And any abstentions, please report those. Thank you. So that one we will table as well. Commissioner Reedy? Did you raise your hand?
No.
Oh, all right. I would like to propose a last minute change to the agenda. Since we have folks here for public comment, I would like to move that up before closing comments so that commissioners have the opportunity to if they so desire. So I will move to move public comment before closing comments. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Groves. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed, please say no. No opposition, any abstentions? Thank you. So for public comment, I have a form filled out, and was there only one person giving public comment this evening? Was that going to be you, Athena? Okay.
I made packets, if you guys like the packets.
Who told you that?
So, but I probably not enough for everyone. That's okay.
That's
We'll
perfect.
share. We'll
And
share.
I know the virtual people don't get them because they're physical, and I didn't send anything ahead of time. But
Will you please state your name for the
my name's
record?
Athena Aguiar.
Thank you, Athena.
Okay. For their benefit, the first page of this is from the RAINN website. If you guys just want to Google it right now, you probably could. It's RAINN. Under the tab sexual violence, if you hover over it, the first thing is statistics. That's what this is.
Thank you.
And then the second thing on it is the sexual assault procedure, which you guys have access to. I'm not sure you guys don't have access. There actually isn't. This one's the lowest quality.
That's
Or
fine.
one of them.
Thank
I know. When I read this paper, I can feel on the page with someone. I sincerely believe whoever wrote this was trying their very best. It reads like the author's picture from the perspective of a police officer. A response to a 911 call from a 20-something living alone in a one-bedroom apartment who was just assaulted by a stranger. That is not most courageous. I want you to read this procedure from the perspective of a 39-year-old woman who's finally processing what really happened to all those times her father's not into a veteran in the military. Or the recently remarried 27-year-old who was starting to understand that it was not normal to come out of a seizure, shocked that her husband had begun having sex with her while she was unconscious. The 18-year-old living paycheck to paycheck whose boss attacked her in the storeroom and then fired her a week later. These people have never read Eugene Police Procedure number 3.4. They probably never will. A lot of factors create an environment in which these people do not report their rapes. The official procedure of the local police department is likely one of the most impactful. There's a reason that father, that husband, that boss felt safe to rape those women. They knew they would never go to prison for it. It would never even be reported. I believe this commission can change that. To start, I recommend changing the name of this procedure to stranger sexual assault and creating a second procedure called known perpetrator sexual assault. Or create a part A or part B to that effect. This change will simultaneously continue to acknowledge and prepare officers to respond to periods of assault, while also acknowledging the far more common rapes by friends, neighbors, classmates, boyfriends, coworkers, uncles, etc. Thank you for your time, and I hope you all take the time to reread this procedure from the perspective of the majority of rape victims.
Thank you for sharing that. And for providing the opportunity to read the policy through other perspectives. It does say that the effective date of this policy was 9/9/24. I know that this is not one that came before the police commission. Sergeant Jordan, do you have a record of the changes that were made in September of 24?
I don't hear with me, no.
That was what I thought.
Yeah.
There's more. I'm sure that this is the most up-to-date
Yes,
one.
it is.
My point being that the police commission has not actually reviewed this one, at least in recent history. Vice Chair Shivers, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just had a request for the member of the public who came to give testimony. If she could send an email to the commission, because our work planning session is coming up and this seems like a very good thing to go on it.
Holly, what is that email address?
I don't have it handy, but if you go to the Eugene Police Commission website, it's there. I can look it up here in a minute.
The email address is available and that will go to our staff liaison who will then forward that to to myself and the vice chair. And because you brought this to our attention tonight, we'll certainly make sure that this comes before all of the police commission. Do we have other comments on this public comment that's been brought to us this evening?
I don't see anything online.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't like fill out like a comment.
You gotta have your
card or
fill out a
whatever,
card.
But
Yes, can you come up here, please, so that you can be on camera?
another thing, I
Can you give us your name, please?
my name's Io.
Thank you.
I was just reading through that policy, I read through it. It also sort of like assumes that the perpetrator is like has a penis. And it like is like it's all focused on like one very particular kind of sexual assault. And like there's like a whole different like broad range of things that I feel like should be like addressed in like that like sexual assault can take all sorts of different forms and any person who commits sexual assault, right? And it's just I feel like a critical eye to be put on a lot of these like you know like evidence collecting criteria and how that can be like broad. Well, it's all that.
Thank you for that, Io. Councilor Gross has come up with that email address and he'll bring that to you. DC Adams, you're on the spot. I know we're asking you to think on the fly here. Do you have any commentary as far as the recommendations that was made by the public?
Oh, yeah, sure. First of all, thank you. Very brave of you to come here and speak as you did and very articulate. I did like your idea about splitting the policy. And I think it's a really great idea to bring it to this commission for the committee to look at and we can move forward, try to get a different perspective on it. I would just, one thing to think about with evidence collection, otherwise I hear you, I mean, things you're saying, we do have some legal criteria about how we do things and conduct things. That's not to mitigate what you said, but it may be a factor into how we write policy around that as to make sure we maintain the criminal aspect of this, because ultimate goal is we want to arrest, convict, identify, arrest, convict sexual offenders. So thank you both.
DC, is it statutorily feasible to separate the policy into the two categories?
Yes, I think we can.
Excellent.
We'll have to look at it and we can come up with some ideas. Whether we separate the policies out, we can subpoint the same, policy heading actually does have some point. I think, the idea that we title it sexual assault. Maybe there's some different language we could use there. So there's things we can do to look at this and then bring it to the commission. So for sure.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, DC Adams. Sergeant Jordan, does that align with your expectation as well?
I think it's very doable, so I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move into closing comments, I did want to remind the commission that we have our work retreat next month. It will be on the second Thursday evening as our normal police commission meeting would be. We will be actually, and Holly, please correct me if the information has changed since I spoke to Jeremy, but I believe that the work retreat will be at Eugene Municipal Court.
That's correct, in the community courtroom.
And we will plan to begin at 4 p.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
And it will be in person. Dinner will be provided for the commissioners and the staff who accompany us on that. And for a little bit of history for the new commissioners, because there are a couple who are even newer than me, we use this opportunity to build our work plan for the next 2 years. We align with the city of Eugene's fiscal biennial cycle. And so we will identify policies for that we believe are worthy of our review, either due to how long they've been out there since they've been reviewed, or when a member of the community brings those to our attention and requests edits, or by ones that Chief Skinner and staff have identified as needing to have our input put on them. Chief Skinner will join us for at least part of that work retreat. And Sergeant Jordan, I believe, will not be probably. We may or may not have Sergeant McCauley, but either way, we will be in good hands for the EPD. And so, but at the end of that, we will have narrowed down, hopefully, a good idea of what we're going to be working on for the next 2 years. And that will go into our report to City Council this summer. City Council reviews our work plan and typically approves it. Do you think there's ever a time when they don't approve it?
I don't.
Okay, so City Council approves that work plan, and then that's what we primarily work off of for the next 2 years, except for the category that Vice Chair Shivers pointed out of emerging issues. Examples of emerging issues that came up in the last 2 years. For example, we had the issue of female employees at the EPD workplace. That was one where we carved out time to work specifically on that one. Another one was the guardian trailers. That one was not on our work plan, but it ended up taking up several of our meetings to address that one. So there is always room, even if something is not necessarily on the work plan, there can be room made to address different policies that are brought to us by the community employees of EPD or other areas. Councilor Yeh.
Chair, I just wanted to verify, I have it starting earlier, right? At 4?
4 p.m. Yes. And we are planning to go to 8 p.m. If we can knock everything out before then, of course, I'm more than happy to let everybody go home early. But we will be off-site, so do not come here to EPD. Don't come to the Kilcullen room. It is, Holly, what is the standard on is that one open to the public?
Yes.
Okay, it is open to the public for folks to come and attend and observe that as well.
Correct.
What's the parking?
Good question. I've never been to the municipal building. So
Right.
parking, it's on-street parking?
Well, there's a lot, I just don't know if we can use it.
There's some parking on the west side of the building, in the alley between the building and the tire shop. There's also, it's kind of 2-hour parking on 11th and on Lincoln. And you should be able to park there and then not have any issues after hours, so.
One thing that I will ask the commissioners to keep in mind as we go into this work retreat, and it's something that was actually just very recently brought to my attention by the ever capable Jeremy Cleverseed. The community safety payroll tax that we hear so much about and that the chief constantly thanks the community for was actually recommended by police commission about 8 years ago. And that is something that was given an 8-year lifetime, as I understand it, for city council. And that will require renewal at the end of fiscal year 2027, which again aligns with our work plan. And so a lot of what we will be doing is examining how we can re-recommend that to city council, or if it's plausible. Obviously, there's a whole lot going on with the budget right now that's out of our hands, but this is an area that police commission actually had a very large impact about 8 years ago, and we have the opportunity to do this again. Commissioner Reedy?
Yeah. And again. It'll come back.
All right, well, you'll get an opportunity during the
Oh,
closing.
yeah, I have it.
See, that's all I have to do,
Because
is
for
try to
those of
move
us
on and then.
who,
you
yes, see,
remember.
that doesn't.
Thank
For
you,
those of
auditor.
us-
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark.
I have another one.
Lucky you. Because those of us who are newer on the commission may not actually have read the entire policy of the Eugene Police Department, which I'm sure the older members all have reviewed constantly and I'm quite familiar with. But if we're going to have ideas for this planning session for 2 years, it might behoove those of us not as familiar to at least look it up online and look at the headings and see if there's anything interesting that you want to address at this planning meeting. Because when I think about what in the Eugene Police Department's policy needs looking at.
So Sergeant Jordan has done a lot of the legwork already for us. She's identified several of the policies that are due for review,
I would depending on.
either by longevity or by circumstances, for example, our federal government changing, and things that are very front and center in the community of Eugene right now. For example, if EPD can assist ICE with any of the immigration sweeps, the answer is no. For the most part, they cannot, but we will definitely more than likely bring that policy to the table just to make sure that we are all aware of what EPD can and cannot do, and that we are able to speak confidently to that as we engage with the community. Community safety payroll tax. And I've actually had to do a whole lot of research on that in the last week, because I actually did not know that that was something the police commission had brought to city council. We can move into closing comments now. And I am going to start with Commissioner Reedy.
Pass.
All right, then. Just like that, huh?
Just like.
All right. Counselor Ye.
Yeah, I just want to thank the two folks who came to speak. I had not read this policy in detail myself, as it hasn't come to police commission, but I think you identified something that's important to look at, and I'm glad we're able to address it. You know, it's a great timing, and so thank you.
Agreed. Commissioner Lyman.
Give a seminar on how to come to I mean, our commission is policy recommendations, and you came with the policy. I mean, it's the first time in years I've ever seen that. So really, props to you, because you got real-time feedback from the decision makers that they're gonna, look at it, and you got it from us as well. And that's just a really, really good way to do it. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Counselor Groves.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to thank you for coming forward, and I always appreciate it when somebody comes with an issue, also has a solution. And oftentimes now as a city councilor, and prior to that as fire chief, I'd hear a lot of complaints. And I always have my people, I'm glad to hear your complaints, but you better come with a couple of solutions. And so that's very helpful, and I appreciate that. I also want to say, being new to this body, I really appreciate the depth of conversation and how everybody, including the police staff, I feel like everybody's trying to work to just make the system better. And that is greatly appreciated. I don't think we ever arrive where we need to be. We always want to keep striving to be better. And that's what I'm seeing here. And I'm really pleased with that. I think it's a good group of people. So thank you.
Commissioner Neal,
Just to say thank you to everybody who prepared for the meeting.
Vice Chair Shivers.
Yeah, so I got my start in activism before I was on the police commission, and I am very used to the refrain of like, why don't the politicians listen to us? So I want to point out how almost every single one of us thanked the people who came in and talked to us. So I want to echo that thanks and point out that oftentimes, especially at the local level, decision makers are desperate to hear from the public, not with anger, but with helpful suggestions, because we can't keep up 100% of everything. Like, we're gonna miss stuff. So it's appreciated.
Commissioner Foltz.
I repeat everything everyone said. I know it takes a lot of bravery to come in and speak to a group of folks on top of that. So thank you so much for taking your time this evening to come and talk to us. And big thank you to, I did not give thanks to Sergeant Jordan. Thank you for all your work you do on the policy side. You really do make it look easy. Thanks all.
Hey, thank you, DC Adams, for stepping in for Chief Skinner. And thank you, AIC Lieutenant Griffith, for being Cindy tonight.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, that's just how we are always going to be known. You might actually end up being the IA person, but we're always just going to call you Cindy.
That's fair. He's earned it.
Yes. Big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Sergeant Jordan, next time we see you, there better be a baby.
That's the idea.
And thank you for our community for coming out and presenting to us this evening. Again, your timing was probably, I don't think I could have choreographed the timing better than the way you did that. So excellent work on that. And with that, our meeting is adjourned.
And the cub report.
Yes, and the cub report.